Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are putting on our hard hats and plunging into one of the most critical and, let's be honest, potentially catastrophic stages of any major enterprise transformation.
Right.
We're talking about SAP data conversion. And we are diving into a methodology that's really built from decades of, well, painful experience. A blueprint to make sure you don't become another casualty of a failed data migration.
That's right.
I mean, the sources we have here, they don't pull any punches. They deliver a truly terrifying figure. Previous implementations show that data conversion can eat up, something like 40% of the entire project?
40% of the effort and the risk. And that 40% isn't just a cost estimate. It's really an indicator of where things go wrong.
A risk indicator, okay.
Yeah, so our mission today is to treat data conversion, or DC not, as some technical chore for programmers in a dark corner, but as a highly disciplined project within a project, because it absolutely has to be.
A project within a project. I like that.
It's the only way to prevent that catastrophic failure.
Okay, so to guide us through this, we need to get the language right. Let's establish some core terms. We'll be hearing about business objects, or BOs, a lot.
Right. Think of these as the actual entities of the business. Forget tables and fields for a second. A business object is like a conceptual thing, the material master, an open sales order. It's the stuff the business actually manages.
Got it. Okay, then we have LS. That was pretty easy. Legacy system, the old world you're leaving behind.
Exactly. And of course, LSMW, that's the legacy system migration workbench.
The classic SAP tool.
It's the tool that does the physical loading. It handles the mechanics, but, not the thinking.
And finally, the domains. SAP is massive, so we'll be talking about the core modules a lot.
Yep, that's FI and CO for finance and controlling, MM for materials management, PP is production planning, and SD, sales and distribution. These are where the functional keys to the kingdom are held.
Spanning all of those domains, we find what our source calls the Big Five.
Ah, yes, the Big Five. These are the data conversion cornerstones. They take the most time, cause the most fights.
Which are?
Material master, customer master, vendor master, bill of materials, or Bowman routings. If you can get these complex objects right, you've pretty much broken the back of the project.
Okay, so let's start with the mindset. Because when these projects hit the skids, you always hear the blame game. Tech teams blame bad data, functional teams blame bad programs.
Right. But the source material is crystal clear here. The issue is almost always functional, not technical.
That feels like a fundamental truth that gets missed.
It gets missed all the time. Everyone assumes the problem is in the code, the extraction or the load, but it's the bit in the middle, the transformation. That's the absolute nightmare.
The part where you're trying to get the right data with the right values for a totally new process.
Exactly, for the new SAP process, not the old one. And that's a huge shift in perspective for people who've worked in the legacy system for 20 years.
So what's the required philosophy then?
Discipline. You have to solve issues immediately and correctly. The source uses this great analogy. It says, it is not the speed at which you enter a turn that is most important. It is the one at which you get out of it.
I like that.
Yeah, it might feel slower at the start because you're doing all this hard mapping work up front, but you gain so much speed later because you got it right the first time.
And if you bypass that discipline, well, that's when you get the horror stories.
Oh, the list is brutal. You see data loaded that's just inconsistent. You see data that loaded fine in one test, and then suddenly it's rejected.
Why would that happen?
Because some other functional change, maybe in PP or SD, completely invalidated the whole data set.
And the ultimate failure is forcing a go live anyway because the deadline is there.
Exactly. The go live is in rush mode. People are patching master data directly in the production system. And the source calls these moving targets. It is so much harder and more expensive to fix data after you go live.
You're patching a leaky dam while the river's flowing over it.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So how do we instill that discipline from day one? The first directive is think SAP. Seems simple, but I bet it's a huge hurdle.
It is. You have to completely divorce yourself from the old system structure. You figure out what SAP needs first based on the new processes. Then you go back to the legacy system and figure out how to map it, transform it, clean it up.
So what happens if you don't do that? If you start with the old system first?
Okay. Let's say in the old system you had one field material type and it just said finished good. Simple.
Right.
But in SAP, that material type field might drive really complex stuff inventory valuation and finance, which data screens are allowed in materials management. If you just map finished good one-to-one without understanding all that downstream impact,
You've created a ticking time bomb.
a time bomb that will fail silently until, the first big financial report blows up.
Wow. Okay, so that really drives home the need for early action. The source is to start data purging and cleansing right away.
This is one of the biggest time savers, and you can do it before the project even formally kicks off. Deleting obsolete customer accounts, purging materials that haven't moved in 5 years. It just reduces the volume, which reduces your risk and your effort.
And for the actual technical part, the guideline is small is beautiful.
Yeah, don't try to load everything at once. Start with maybe 10 or 20 records of a business object. Learn the program, see how SAP handles errors, and iron out the kinks with a small, manageable set of data.
Let's shift from philosophy to structure. The blueprint insists on treating data conversion as a project within the project.
Yeah.
Why that specific framing?
Because it's a massive resource sink. It cuts across every single business function. You need key users, developers, analysts, data owners, all at the same time.
So you get bottlenecks.
Huge bottlenecks and conflicting tasks.
Mm-hmm.
A full DC plan is the only way to manage that intersection and assign clear accountability.
And that plan has to define the which objects and the data type. We're talking master, transactional, and historical.
Precisely. Master data is your static core, like vendors. Transactional is the current stuff, like open purchase orders. Historical is just for reference. You have to be clear up front on what you need for every single BO.
And the who. The source puts a huge emphasis on the business object owner.
Yes, this is critical. The BO owner is the functional leader who will be most affected if that object fails. If the material master conversion is flawed, the head of supply chain owns it.
Not some IT manager.
No, it ensures the final sign-off comes from someone whose actual job depends on that data being 100% correct.
Now, for the part that I think makes executives nervous, the estimation. The work breakdown structure, or WBS, it calculates effort in person days, not calendar time.
Yeah.
Why is that distinction so important?
It forces you to be objective. Calendar time is full of meetings, holidays, sick days. Person days is a pure measure of effort. How many 8-hour days does this task actually require?
Right, so a 10-person day task could take a month in real time if the person is only available a couple of days a week.
Exactly. The effort is 10 days, the duration is 4 weeks. It separates the work from the schedule.
And this WBS delivers that brutal reality check. The ballpark figure is 400 to 600 person days per legacy system.
It is. It's an enormous number, and it often shocks management. But here's the kicker the source points out. If you have 2 legacy systems, the work is double.
It's double. You don't get any efficiencies.
Not really. You're looking at maybe 800 to 1,200 person days.
Yep.
The mapping from the second legacy system to SAP is a totally new effort. It has its own data structures, its own nuances. It's a fresh project.
So when you present that 1,000-person day number, the pushback is guaranteed. That much, are you sure?
And the answer is always, let's recalculate. What happens is, when you force the team to break down every little task meetings, reading specs, resolving conflicts, the number often goes up.
It goes up.
It does. You realize that 20 hours of meetings to argue about material master fields adds up faster than 40 hours of programming?
This feeds right into the biggest resource problem, the key user bottleneck. This is when validation, testing, and training all hit the same person's desk at once.
They're just completely overwhelmed. And this is where the planning has to be ruthless. The core advice is to assume your key users are available for data conversion tasks only 20% of their time.
1 day a week.
1 day a week.
Okay, hold on. I have to challenge that. How do you possibly sell that? The main project manager needs those people for integration testing, for training, for everything. They're not going to accept that they've lost 80% of their key resources.
They will absolutely push back. And this is where you use the WBS data to win the argument. You show them the numbers, you explain that if they schedule conversion work at 50% availability, the key users will fail. They cannot properly validate thousands of records while also learning a new system and training their team.
So it's a protective measure.
It's a protective measure for the data quality, which is the whole point. The 20% rule forces every other part of the project to plan around that reality. You're betting the entire project on a resource that is guaranteed to burn out and make mistakes if you ignore it.
Okay, with resources locked down, we're in execution. And the methodology is strict. Key users must own the mapping and conversion rules documents.
It's a deliberate choice. It forces the business experts to really sweat it out and understand which SAP fields drive their process. They can't just pass ambiguity off to a programmer. The rule is, if it's not in the document, it doesn't exist.
And to prevent confusion, the documentation must always refer to fields as table fields.
This is so important for clarity.
Yeah.
Take a field like payment terms, Z term. It might exist in a few different tables.
Okay.
If you just write Z term, are you talking about the one for the sales view of a customer or the one for the finance view?
And what's the consequence if you mix those up?
It's a catastrophe. Sales might use a 60-day rule, but finance is expecting 30 days for their collections reports. You've just created a conflict that directly impacts cash flow. The table field convention stops that ambiguity dead.
Let's talk about the biggest point of collision, the material master. The source says you have to tackle this first, even though it's the hardest.
It's the gravitational center of the whole thing. It involves every domain, PP, SD, FI, CO. Conflict is not just possible, it's guaranteed.
Which is why it needs that disciplined 6-step documentation process.
Right. So first, each domain lists the fields they need. Second, you consolidate that into a master list. Third, you build the template. Fourth, each domain writes their own rules independently.
And fifth is where the fun starts. You merge them.
That's where the pain begins.
Yeah.
And step 6 is the most important for resolving that pain. You create the questions list.
The to-do list.
Exactly. This is where you identify every single conflict. The source estimates you generate an average of 2 questions per field.
2 questions per field. So for a material master with 300 fields, you're looking at 600 questions.
600 questions that must be resolved, signed off, and documented before anyone writes a line of code. It feels like a lot of overhead, but you're solving process conflicts on paper where it's cheap.
After that, you're in the iterative cycle of data and rules adaptation. This is where the time pressure really hits and people cut corners.
And that leads to the golden rule of iteration. The specs must always be updated to reflect new decisions before you correct the program.
So no quick fixes in the code.
Never. Trying to save a few hours by skipping the documentation update is the single most common error. It leads to outdated specs, undocumented rules, and you just lose control of the project. Discipline over speed every time.
So once the specs are stable, you go into the final load cycles.
Yep. You start with small load unit testing. Then you move to extract and load full-size testing with 100% of the real data. And the peak is the acceptance system full load.
This one is mandatory.
Absolutely. You load everything into a clean, empty SAP client, and you get written sign-off from the key user and the BO owner. Only then are you clear to go to pre-production.
The source has one last interesting idea for managing conflict during that validation phase, especially between production planning and finance.
The 3-client setup, yeah, this can be a lifesaver. The PP team is constantly changing bombs and ratings for their tests, right? But that means the FICO team can't get a stable costing run because the underlying data keeps moving.
So the validation is useless.
Exactly. So the suggestion is to set up 3 separate clients, one for PP, one for FICO, and one for everything else. It lets them all work independently without stepping on each other's toes.
You know what we've covered here, the 20% rule, the 600 questions for one object, it's incredibly demanding. It feels like a mix of common sense and management 101, but just applied with this, I don't know, military discipline.
It is. The hard part isn't understanding the steps. It's having the organizational guts to resist the pressure, to not push issues down the road, and to actually complete each step to 100%.
It's about discipline.
It is. If you maintain that discipline, success builds on itself, like a positive snowball effect. If you compromise, failure just accelerates.
So if you're a listener and you actually manage to follow this incredibly demanding roadmap, what's the ultimate payoff? What does this discipline actually buy you?
It buys you the most boring, stress-free go-live you could ever imagine. If this methodology is followed, the final production load is, and I mean this genuinely, just a formality. The goal is to deliver master data that is so accurate it will not need rework once you're live. You avoid all that panicked, costly, moving target chaos after the fact. And that, right there, is the difference between a success story and a failure that haunts a company for years.